The dragon is they, them. So.
That's right. They, them. Hey there, gamers. Welcome back to another episode of D&D Brothers. I'm one of your hosts, Jamie.
I'm your other host, Kyle.
And today we're going to be looking and discussing collaborative DMing. Came to my attention this morning when an article appeared in my feed, and I took the time to sit down and read through it. It had some interesting ideas, but it also proposed some difficult challenges that I could see. And so we're going to take a few minutes today to sort of go over it and bounce the ideas back and forth of what we would see being the pros and cons of this collaborative DMing idea. So to break it down, collaborative DMing takes away a portion of the responsibility of creating the campaign, world, storyline, everything like that from the DM and puts it on their players. So for example, you might sit down at a session 0 and you might set out that you're in the Forgotten Realms, but you're going to ask people to bring in NPCs. They're going to bring in heavy backstories, which can be a big factor in it. Places they'd like to visit, stuff like that. And then you move on to the actual gameplay where, for example, I'll have Kyle enter a room and I'll say, okay, Kyle, what do you see in the room?
Stuff.
And that's exactly why you don't want to do collaborative DMing, because you get feedback like that. But in an ideal situation, your player would turn around and say, well, I'm looking around the room. I see that it's a bedroom. And so there's a bed and an armoire and this, that, and everything. They can also be describing NPCs, right? So you're interacting with an individual and the player actually takes the opportunity to describe what they perceive to be the NPC, how they visualize the shopkeeper or the guard at the gate or, the wandering minstrel. So they have an opportunity to sort of feed into that factor as well. So that's like from a DM point of view, I would say that could really alleviate some of the work I have to do creating all these scenarios and characters and stuff like that. Is that something as a player you think should be your responsibility? And if so, how do you feel about that contribution?
I definitely think that that's something that, we already do to a certain degree. I'm very descriptive with my character, the actions, and I also tend to ask questions that will provoke descriptions of things. And I'll, so for example, we go into a dungeon, I'll be like, so I'm in the dungeon, and I'll usually have an ulterior motive of why I'm asking. I'm always
shocked.
I'm always working at an angle.
Yeah.
And I'll ask, what are the walls covered in and stuff like that. And so it's not exactly what you're referring to where I would take the full responsibility of describing. But I will say that sometimes when I ask questions or something like that, I kind of know what the answer is going to be, but I'm provoking the answer by asking the question.
Right.
But then again, when it comes to my own character, I'm highly descriptive when I attack.
Yes.
When when we have a kill, like it was me who started the introduction of the describing how you kill.
Yep. Which I've actually adopted quite heavily.
Yeah. You describe how you if you kill something, how do you do it? I also am very much with the describe like the environment and stuff like that. Am I in this type of environment, that type of environment? So it's not exactly what you're referring to as collaborative DMing in the sense where I am actually taking full control of describing what it is, but I'm saying things or provoking things from the DM that are allowing for more description to come. Now, I am 100% on board with that. I do think that if you want to create a good ambiance in a group, a good ambiance for a campaign, you can't leave all of the description to one individual person. It's just too much, and it's hard to remember what you've described, what you haven't described. And more importantly than that, what is important to an individual player, right? Like, absolutely. You know me, I'm very detail orientated. The way you describe something, I'm going to use everything. The one that I remember the most was that we had a situation where we came across 2 children that we suspected could be ghosts. And I asked, is it misty out? The DM said, yes, it is. I said, do I see, liquid clinging to their clothes from the misty environment, And he said, well, yes, you do, actually. So I was able to determine that they were not ghosts at that point. It turned out they were fucking ghosts anyways. But my question should have been answered properly. Anyways,
yeah.
It doesn't matter. But what that did, though, is by asking that question, by asking for those details of the environment, the DM did provide additional, which then fleshed out the scenario that we were in. Now we know we're in a misty place with, moving through the forest and everything. And it creates that ambiance that you're looking for. And again, a more description, more enjoyment, more things to work with. So I think collaborative DMing is great, but there's, I think, variations on how to do that. that. So there's the way you described, there's the way I described. So you want to find what's right for your group.
Well, and that's it. The article goes on to describe. I apologize if you weren't finished there.
No, I
The
just
article-
wanted to mention one last thing, which is be aware, however, that there are going to be people that are going to be more into that, in tune with that, and people that are going to be less in tune with that. And what you don't want to have happen is find somebody who's a little bit less comfortable, maybe talking about it, less imaginative or whatever, and then you find them falling behind in game time or game contribution if you're doing something like collaborative DMing. So it is you got to keep a good eye on it if you're going to do that.
In picking up from there, it's not the topic I was actually going to launch onto, but it is one of the other aspects that's covered in this article, is that the difference in players and ability to improvise, ability to imagine and create believable scenarios, detailed information, stuff like that. Not everybody's up to that, right? So it's really, you have to work at it. And as a DM, I'm going to have to know my players to know which ones I can rely on for that kind of detail and which ones I'm going to have to really encourage to feed into that idea and stuff like that, and say, okay, listen, this week I'm going to have you meet a character. I'm going to need you to come up with an idea. Give them the time to prep in advance. Some of the other topics that we'll just really sort of skim over, rotating DMs. That can be a really interesting possibility, but it does take a lot of collaborative effort on everybody's part, right? A lot of communication. This is where I'm going, and you don't want somebody to bugger up a plan you had laid out or whatever. But it does lead to some interesting unplanned events as well.
Sure. My concern with that, now that you mentioned it's rotating a DM, my only problem that I would find with that is that in a lot of cases, a lot of campaigns have kind of like this goal that you're working towards, and sometimes you don't know, or most times you don't know everything that's happening in a campaign beforehand. And part of the joy of playing the campaign is finding out those secrets of whatever the story holds that you're playing through. And if you're rotating DMs, you're kind of like, if you're rotating through the entire team, well, then there's zero surprise because they're going to know about it. And if you're not rotating through the entire team, well, a portion of the group is going to know about things. So I probably wouldn't be on board for rotating DM, but you could do like a rotating DM for varied campaigns. Like you run, like, say, 2 campaigns, and every 2 weeks you play one or the other, and that's a different DM. So you could do something like that. But rotating DMs would be one. Like collaborative DMing, I would be on board for. Rotating DM in the same campaign, not so much.
Yeah, and that was one of the points in the article, is that it does risk high level of metagaming. Yeah. Right? Because everybody knows everything that's going on, and it does play into the factor. Another quick point that they touched on, which, again, I agree 100%. It kind of touches on the collaborative DMing, something you talked about, following the campaign, stuff like that, is exactly that. If you are in a campaign, sort of like ours with Storm King's Thunder, there is a structured storyline to sort of adhere to. Yeah. You're not required to follow line for line, but there's an overall arching plan. And with collaborative DMing, you do run a very high risk of not sticking to that and running into complications when you try to do that. Yeah. So that's I'm a control freak. I'll admit that. Detail-oriented control freak. So I really don't want to give up DMing to somebody else, even for a week. So I personally wouldn't be totally on board with collaborative DMing, although I did like the idea of players providing details about certain specific aspects. Not in this group, but in the other group, my junior group that I refer to them as, they're pretty much detailing the inn that they recently acquired. Okay. Right? So I gave them the inn, and they're sort of building it to what they expect.
If you're giving something to players and they're telling you how they build it, I expect them to be the ones giving you the details.
Well, that's it. It was a pre-established building, but I pretty much said to them, I said, like, you guys can sort of design it as you want.
So they're getting to play Barbie Dreamhouse.
And I think we'll call it on that, because I think we've run the mill on that one.
Yeah, I think, it's really, again, one of those things. For your campaign, you decide if it's right, it's going to be relevant, it's going to be dependent on the players that you have, their level of comfort with doing those kind of things, the DM with how much they want to conceal details of the campaign or control the details of the campaign, I should say. So basically, you check with your group, you see what they think, have a conversation, and if it works and it's great, then why not give it a try, right? Yep, that's it. So thank you so much for stopping by and checking out this video on collaborative DMing. So if you have any questions or comments on the subject that you'd like us to maybe go over in a future video, please leave those in the comment section below, and I'll let Jamie close out the video.
Always, we ask you, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit that notification button so you find out when we upload content, which we do on a fairly consistent basis. And of course, keep on gaming.